Hello, everybody. I have Edwin Wade. He's a principal industrial consultant at Dragos, supporting the Middle East and surrounding regions. How are you, Eddie?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Can you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Dragos and what you do at Dragos, actually?
Sure. So again, my name is Edwin Wade. I'm a principal industrial consultant with Dragos. I've been in the OT space or industrial control space for upwards of around 20 years. My background is as a control systems vendor, just designing and implementing control systems that are used in these various environments. So I have a good perspective on the technology in that environment. Since then, I've come up and helped design additional cyber protection solutions and also done some penetration testing in this environment. I've got a master's in cybersecurity for the industrial segment from Georgia Tech, and was proud to be one of the first people to graduate from that program, exclusively focused on cyber physical.
Can you walk us through the importance of industrial cybersecurity and how it's essential, especially in the Gulf region? Let's talk general topics about cybersecurity.
Okay, so in the GCC, we've got a variety of industries that are very important to the region. Things like oil and gas, power generation, and water come to mind as some of the very critical and prominent industries in the region. With oil and gas, we've got things like upstream, midstream, and downstream, where upstream segments have the opportunity for espionage kind of value or reasons that they might be targeted. What we've seen so far. Midstream segments seem to be a little bit of an emerging landscape. And when I say midstream within the oil and gas region, or within the oil and gas industry rather, I'm referring to things like transporting the energy that we've collected or extracted from the ground, transporting it to other various regions around the world through things like pipelines or shipping. And this seems to be a little bit more of an emerging threat or an emerging target that people have been targeting. For example, looking at some of the recent attacks in the U.S. around pipelines, and we can see from the Colonial Pipeline attack what kind of an impact that can have on the geography as a whole, with fuel shortages and other things of that nature showing up. So with an observed impact like that, we can see why that might be targeted going forward. Downstream, looking at refining, like oil and gas refining, that's going to be a major part of the process of what helps drive the industry. And it deals a lot with complex processes using potentially dangerous materials. And so that too can definitely be a target, and something that we and the world, the region, everybody ought to seek to protect. Some of the other industries that would be important to the region might include power. So power generation, for example, if we're not able to generate power and push that into the grid, then clearly things like our homes, hospitals, and other infrastructure that depends on power will not be able to continue to operate and have our society run as we would like for it to. Transmission, another segment of the electrical power industry, involves transporting power from the electrical generation plants out to the various regions and other, getting it spread out to the cities and things like that. And that's unique and interesting because it's much more distributed than, say, an industrial facility that's all contained within the bounds of a single fence. So now we're getting into a little bit more of a distributed situation. And we've seen in the past where power has been, or transmission segment of power has been attacked by way of the Ukrainian attacks. So where adversaries have gone after Ukrainian transmission substations in order to cut off power to certain regions of the geography. So that kind of gets into how and why power would be something that would be critical, especially given that we have seen attacks on that segment. Distribution, the bottom side of power, or the final run, let's say, out to the end asset owners. Again, that's going to offer the opportunity to significantly disrupt society, disrupt the way that our cities run. And again, we have seen examples of that, again, by way of Ukraine, where adversaries have gone after the distribution schemes of the power industry. I might continue on with water. I guess the power industry is important everywhere, globally. Everybody depends heavily on power in the segments I described a moment ago. Water, however, does have some unique aspects to the Middle East region, especially because we live in a more arid region, and our water generation, our water, where we get our water, drinking water from, has to rely a lot more on industrial processes, or heavy use of the industrial processes, than maybe some of the other regions around the world. We'll have a lot of desalination processing going on, which is going to be a heavier industrial process than some of the others, and that gives the opportunity to have for an adversary to impact water in the region. And water is one of those underlying fundamental things to life. Everybody needs water in order to survive. The society needs water in order to do the things that make us great. And so having that the strong industrial component here in the GCC and greater Middle Eastern regions gives the opportunity for someone else to see this as a viable target and attempt to go after it.
I will ask you about the report right now. According to the report of Oil and Natural Gas Cyber Threat Perspective for Gulf Cooperative Council Region, it's in November 2021, actually. There is activity groups are described as most active in the ONG, or oil and natural gas sector in Gulf region. Can you please explain these activity groups more?
Sure. So just maybe a quick definition on what an activity group is to kind of set the scene a little bit. So activity groups are Dragos's way of defining or tracking different teams, attack campaigns, and other cyber-related activity. So you see the same terms used across many of the intelligence communities, but this really helps cluster a set of activity, or maybe a team or project that is focused on performing malicious activities. It helps us track, because the reason is that, or the motivation for having these activity groups is that different adversaries may be targeting different things. They have different motivations, different intentions, and as a result, they may have, they may behave differently. And so by identifying different unique activity groups, we can start to hone in on the different personalities and incentives and motivations of these, to track what's going on and where to look for new activity. Some aspects of the activity groups are that they're often state sponsored, and the state-sponsored activity groups would likely have some sort of political motivations behind them. But we also have activity groups can also be like cyber criminals. Those are often financially motivated sort of activity groups. Things like ransomware might be something you could affiliate with cyber criminals or financially motivated things. Whereas destructive or activities that don't produce financial results are more likely to be politically motivated, for example. A couple of the activity groups that we've seen, high-profile activity groups we've seen recently, Xenotime. So historically, Xenotime has been the most aggressive group. Many of the activity groups, if you go through the list that Dragos is tracking, many of them have been performing positioning or espionage, reconnaissance, discovery type activities, where they gain access to either the IT or the OT networks of our civilization, and they're collecting information, positioning themselves for possible future activities, things like that. We've seen a larger portion of teams doing that. However, Zenitime, in contrast, has been willing to take the effort to get down deep into the networks, get the access to key components like engineering stations, for example, and attempt both disruptive and or destructive payload delivery on industrial systems. That's a pretty big jump. When you look at the larger restraint that state-sponsored activity or state-sponsored groups may portray in collecting their information, and you contrast that with delivering or positioning payloads that can have serious impact on the environment, on the equipment, on the people running the facilities, and all the products that they produce. Like that's a big jump, and it should be respected as such. So on the specific activity groups, I'd say historically Zenitime has been a key person or key group, I guess, to watch out for. We've seen this through the Trisis malware. Trisis was malware from 2017 and had been positioned inside of the safety control system for an industrial facility. And the safety system by itself is there purely to prevent bad things from happening to the facility, like things like presenting explosive conditions or other things of that nature. So it doesn't run the process on a daily basis. It is there just as a safety backstop in case some of the other control systems malfunction or something, bad conditions present themselves. So by targeting the safety system, you are removing the backstop to having a seriously dangerous situation. And if you can access the safety system to do that, maybe I won't speculate on that. But by targeting the safety system and going after that safety backstop, that's a serious thing to go after. Moving on to some more recent events, though, we've seen Dragos has posted about Chernovite. So Chernovite is a new recent activity group that has been associated with the pipe dream malware. Over time, we've progressively seen a growth in the capability and the feature set and just evolution of maturity of malware, of industrial malware over time. And that's recently culminated with the pipe dream malware that has added, it's built in a modular fashion, modularity being an indicator of possible reuse. It does add new features with ICS relevant capabilities, including the ability to access and control physical equipment directly using by accessing the controllers and the industrial protocols that the control systems will respond to. But it's gained some new features that we haven't previously seen in some of these, like the ability to proxy through industrial controllers, so industrial control hardware. That's been a new feature set. Just for example, this offering the ability to the proxy capability or proxy feature set would allow an adversary potentially to come through into a protected network and then move around within that network to access devices, segments that previously would not be accessible through firewall protections and other standard security infrastructure. the recent activity that we've seen through Chernobyl really has been a stepwise, evolution and progression in the capabilities of the adversaries, and we can see that through the technical artifacts that have been inspected now with the pipe dream malware. So that it shows the evolution continuing to march forward and get more serious and more real.
Why does ONG remains at the most significant risk of any GCC sector for the destructive cyber attack? In your opinion, of course. Like, why this sector is very important? Okay, it's like number one, let's say, or like highest priority in this Gulf region. But why in specific? Why in detail? In your opinion, also.
So, I probably start off by. Again, I think I'm going to kind of tail off the last segment of describing how these things, how cyber attacks in general have continued to evolve and become more mature and more aggressive over time, reaching back a ways. If we look at the attack lifecycle or attack trajectories, maybe we've seen in the IT side of things, maybe decades ago, we had things like email viruses traveling around. I love you virus or something like that. Configure was everywhere. Everybody knows that. And then as the adversaries have continued to continue to build malware and explore the possibilities. We get into malware that has tailored backdoor accesses, and now offering an adversary, the ability to persistently maintain control of your environment. Adding in, continuing on with malware evasion, going into ransomware, and the reason I mention all those is really just to kind of show an incremental, stepwise evolution of the adversary's tactics, approaches, strategies, aggressiveness, becoming more mature with the attack toolkits. We've seen that. And if we now take a look, having some context and some insight from life cycles observed in the more exposed IT side of the house, if we look at where we're at in the OT side of the house, I think that we can look at a similar likely life cycle. So here we're now on the seventh key piece of ICS malware that we've observed targeted for ICS. And on the grand scheme of things, we're pretty early in the life cycle of this overall arc of attacking the industrial side of things. Imagine what that's going to look like in 20 years from now, if we're here today, where those adversaries can get to, given that there's enough motivation and incentive to go after these structures. I say that to kind of paint the picture of why we ought to be worried in the industrial segment, because there are plenty of runway for the adversaries to continue to evolve and get stronger and more aggressive toward our systems. A lot of the adversaries that have gone after infrastructure, particularly those that are with the big news headlines and things like that, do have a lot of geopolitical motivations and incentives behind them. Stress between different entities and such, and with the industrial landscape being a bit of a testing ground, let's say, for a cyber battlefield, where we've seen a bit of that in play out live through the last several years in Ukraine, for example. With that being the situation where our civilian infrastructure may be targeted by geopolitical forces, then that's another reason why we should be worried, or we should be respectful and aware of the situation, I guess. Another aspect of concern might be around ransomware, and so we've seen a lot of ransomware activity And that's, financially motivated, totally different group, totally different set of circumstances for why that might show up. But we are starting to see that more and more in the industrial space. We've already seen it plenty in the IT space, cause huge problems there, and we're starting to see it more in the industrial space. The pivot for the crux for ransomware is the ability to create leverage, and so our industrial operations, if those are disrupted, then we get with downtime, we've got immediate financial impact by lack of production, but we also have the greater impact to society. Again, if we're talking about something like power or water, if that gets cut off, then that can have a very quick impact on society from a lot of different angles. So if adversaries are interested in financially motivated adversaries, again, a different group of different activity groups here, but if those teams are interested in creating leverage in order to get their financial payout, then industries will continue to offer an opportunity for them to target where they can create a lot of leverage. Finally, another reason why we might focus on ICS is that the ICS systems and protocols have long been known to be have a large legacy component to them, where they're longer life cycles, slower adaptation, slower to change and such. So we've got a lot of systems there they've been built for functionality. They don't have all the security components built into them. As we now are discovering, realizing, and trying to react, a lot of security features have been built, proposed, specs issued, et cetera. But the adaptation within the environments is slow to respond. Take Modbus, for example. Modbus has long been targeted and used as an example for an industrial protocol that doesn't have a lot of security features built into it or any. And now a new Modbus secure protocol has been issued, but yet it's going to take a while before something like that can get accepted and adapted work its way into the environments. The transition from OPC Classic to OPC UA will be another example where the more secure features built into OPC UA have been around for a really long time, but the uptake to get the newer, more secure protocols into the environments took a really long time, and we still see lots and lots of instances of the older protocols still prevalent. And so to kind of add on to the opportunities from before that adversaries may have had, or incentives that the adversaries may have had, we now have a potentially soft environment just by nature of the technology that has been used to build a lot of the structures. So that might be another reason to pay attention.
According to the report, the entire energy sector, ONG, electric supply chain, all GCC member countries are at risk. Companies and utilities face global risks as never before. Why is that in particular? We are asking about all of the sections you mentioned before. In GCC members, it's very at risk. So why is that actually?
Yeah. So one of the things here is that a lot of the underlying conditions haven't changed. The industries are still strategically or financially valuable, and therefore they offer an incentive for a properly motivated adversary. So given that there's a reason to go after them, then that's going to continue to persist on into the future. Another reason why would be that the ICS malware is again continuing to evolve. So the capabilities are growing. This is showing that there is investment, there's research, there's development going on in this environment to grow and expand. So the adversaries are pushing farther, harder, and deeper into the space. to fulfill whatever their objectives may be. Another aspect, the cyber is being looked at as an alternative battlefield, and the civilian infrastructure has the opportunity to kind of get lost in the fray, get caught up in what maybe ought to be kept outside of our civilian infrastructure. Because of this, and because there's strategic value in that space for geopolitical situations, that can continue to persist on into the future until that concept gets flushed out more, and we can convince the world, or somebody can convince the world to leave civilian infrastructure out of geopolitical tensions. So another reason why this would continue to be a situation going further into the future would be the technology state of our the state of technology within the industrial process areas and the control systems, et cetera. We do continue to advance technology there. However, there is a lot of functionality first type situations where the technology, the protocols, communication strategies, et cetera, are built for automation, for functionality, for being able to pass data around, but not necessarily has it evolved to have all the security features that we expect and are aware of within a lot of our IT protocols and IT infrastructure. Given that lack of security, it presents a lot of opportunities for adversaries to take advantage of that technology. Now that we have, I say now, but over the last, say, 10 years, 15 years, as we've become aware of it, aware of these security gaps, many vendors and teams have responded by starting to include security considerations into the technology. However, it's slow to respond. We're slow to, the life cycles are long, so a lot of the replacements are slow to occur. And in general, it just takes a long time for adaptation to occur in this particular space where where everybody is used to the longer life cycles and longer iterations between generational changes in the OT technology. Take OPC, for example. So OPC had a former version, OPC Classic, had moved to OPC UA that addresses a lot of security concerns in that particular technology, and it's taken years, if not a decade, to really start seeing a lot of the uptake in the spaces. I mean, we still today see a lot of the older OPC technologies being used for sure. And again, just one example that shows how long it takes. Recently, we've seen within the last, say, 5 years, we've seen Modbus Secure be announced as a more security featured set of the old Modbus protocol, Modbus TCP. Modbus has long been used as a in cyber demos and things like that, of showing what industrial protocols look like with no authentication, no encryption, no integrity features, et cetera. And given that it's been positioned there and it's often placed in that context for security discussions, we just now got a Modbus Secure, I say now within the last 5 years again, received a Modbus Secure spec, but the uptake of that, we have to go through the development life cycles of vendors incorporating that into their solutions, and then multiple vendors having incorporated so that it's viable as a communication protocol between different pieces of technology, and then adaptation by the clients through new projects, turnover cycles, and technology upgrades, et cetera. So given that we have a soft, chewy center for a lot of the technology, not all of it, but a lot, it will continue to be an opportunity for adversaries over the years.
After discussing the risks and destructive cyber attacks that are absolutely very dangerous, what Dragos helps to prevent all of that?
So at Dragos, our core focus is on industrial cybersecurity for the industrial space. One of the ways that we do that is through our core product, which the Dragos platform, which focuses on network visibility within the industrial space. We've been delivering architecture reviews and various other assessments and having eyes on industrial technology for years now, not to mention that a huge portion of our team comes from industrial asset owners or the technology vendors in the industrial space. So having strong, heavy background, knowing what's there, one of the conclusions has been that the industrials don't have good visibility of, to be aware of security events, security situations and such in their environment. And so that's where the Dragos platform comes in to help provide the visibility of those environments. Now, with visibility, now you can know if there's, you can see if there's people or if there's adversaries in your environment, if there's malicious activity occurring, if there are vulnerabilities that need to be addressed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the ways that Dragos has tangibly contributed to furthering security within the industrial space. Another piece of that would be through our services wing. Our services teams will go and interact directly with the asset operators, asset owners, to understand the security and the topologies of the environment, looking at the network architectures and such. And one of the things that has been a pain point for industrials for years now has been getting the right security and technology skill sets into their environments. These teams are often populated with very, very skilled process teams that really understand the physics of the materials or the changes of their processes and how to really, build whatever their final products are. Imagine understanding all the chemistry involved with bringing oil out of the ground to getting it into your car, for example. That takes a humongous skill set. But with the process aspect of that doesn't always overlap with the technical aspect of how the computers run and such. So given that that's been a pain point, Dragos has been able to come in with the technical expertise and deploy that over many, many asset owners. By having a concentrated team, we can go to many different areas and deliver expertise and have it contextualized within the industrial context.
Last but not least, can you share some of essential defensive recommendations that benefits these sectors that we mentioned before from these threats, from all the hazards and cyber attack you mentioned earlier?
Okay, yeah, sure. So what can we do to address the issues, the security issues that have been discussed? So Dragos likes to look at this from a couple of key fundamental different categories of protections. Setting up a defensible architecture. This means intelligently designing your architecture so that you are capable of defending it. Having, for example, flat networks with no traffic control between it, like that, you're not going to be able to defend that effectively. So having a defensible architecture would include things like segmentation, having clear boundaries between, say, the IT and the OT. This is largely in place in a lot of the environments that I look at. But there's always opportunities to continue to hone that design over time. Might also include endpoint security in that same kind of a discussion, by having endpoint security solutions that can keep malware out, or even go farther by applying, say, whitelisting type technologies, given that the industrial endpoints don't tend to change a lot over time. They're kind of a build it for performing this particular function, like, say, running an operator station, for example. In doing exactly that, without lots of other changes being applied, whitelisting would be a great solution for that environment. It also avoids some of the administrative overhead, which has been a difficult spot for the industrials over the years. Another aspect of defensible architecture would be establishing well-positioned DMZs. A lot of teams don't have DMZs in place to the extent that maybe we would like to see them. And if they do, a lot of the data flows aren't as respected going through the DMZ. Sometimes data flows will bypass the DMZ, which kind of defeats a lot of the mitigation value from that. A really big thing that we need to see more of would be around the monitoring and visibility side. Over the years, there's typically firewalls segmenting IT and OT. That's going to be a huge thing, but that's largely in place. We do have antivirus deployed throughout many of the environments. Generally speaking, there's something like that deployed throughout a lot of the environments. Often it may be outdated or something. There's deficiencies with it, but it's there. However, with logging, monitoring, security visibility, that is so often seen as lacking or even absent in this environment. And so by bringing logging and monitoring into the system, you are now enabled to see if there's anything going on. You don't have to wait until something negative has happened to the environment. You have the opportunity to catch that beforehand and realize that an adversary that's getting into the environment, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of design up front. There's a lot of dealing with custom situations, custom physical designs, logic that's specific to your plant. That takes a lot of time if we're talking about getting a physical, some physical manifestation of a cyber attack onto an industrial. And given that time factor, that time component is likely to be present, if by employing logging and monitoring and getting some visibility of your systems beforehand, you can really take advantage of that lead time, dwell time up front, and possibly stop something bad, but really before it happens in the earlier segments of the attack life cycle. A couple of the other major topics to include in the list of fundamentals would be managing remote access. With any adversary that has remote access to the environment, it should be fairly apparent that that's bad, and there's a lot that can be done potentially with that, given the connected nature of our technology, the way that it's evolved. Generally speaking, over the years, we have become more connected, and that does include new and more greater volume of remote access. And so whether that's remote access to allow a vendor to provide technical support, or your workforce to gain access during, say, pandemic type of situations that we've experienced over the last couple of years, we do have a growing remote access capability or technology footprint in the environments. But that's we should definitely respect that as being a very sensitive thing, which most teams do, and add in really focus on some of the security controls along with that. Specifically, a specific thing that I would suggest for that would be enabling multi-factor on all remote access connections. That's something that we have recently seen begin to take show up in a lot of things, or in a lot of the remote access technologies over the last several years. So that's great. We are seeing it be present. I can't say that it's present in all of them, but we would sure like for it to be. Multi-factor has been shown to be a very strong wall to get over. Not impossible, but it is a great barrier that is very accessible to teams that are owning that remote access within the environments. Another one would be vulnerability management. Managing the vulnerabilities in the environments, especially given that there is such a large legacy footprint can become important. With known vulnerabilities, these ought to be addressable. If given that they're known, assuming that there's a security patch that has been delivered for this particular issue, working those into your maintenance outages and software update life cycles is doable, and it cuts out one less risk from the environment. A couple of the other specifics that I might point at would be hardening. I don't see a lot of hardening in these environments. A lot of them are populated with default settings and default situations. So bringing in some additional hardening into the environment is a good way to improve your security without having to introduce new software, new solutions, and new devices to administer. Low-hanging fruit, particularly given that they're often populated with default settings. So good opportunity there. And then another opportunity would be to maybe less technologically focused, would be to continue the evolution of bringing your IT and OT teams together. There's a lot of the expertise that exists in the IT space. A lot of the OT teams, again, they've got the process experts, but not necessarily the latest up-to-date skill sets on technology for the fast-moving technology world of IT. So leveraging those two teams together would be another good opportunity to help bring some security into your environment.
Thank you so much, Edwin Wade. He's a principal industrial consultant at the Dragos. Thank you for this valuable information, and see you later.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.